I feel so much for you. It's overwhelming.
Don't worry, I'm here.
She was supposed to drown that night. Instead, the Mafia's most feared man pulled her from the wreckage and into his dark world. Jaxon Creed, the Reaper, saved Saylor Quinn from the sea, but now she's drowning in him. Love wasn't part of his empire. Yet every secret, every touch, pulls them closer to the edge, where passion meets danger and trust could cost them everything. Before we dive into today's story, tell me, where in the world are you watching from tonight? Grab your coffee, dim the lights, and prepare yourself for a journey through love, danger, and redemption. Because tonight, I'm taking you into the world of He Dragged Her from a Sinking Ship, into his dark heart. A story where passion is forbidden, loyalty is deadly, and one man's darkness meets the only light he could never destroy. Are you ready? Then let's begin. The harbor was quiet under the cloak of night, save for the gentle lapping of waves against the docked vessels. Saylor Quinn adjusted her jacket against the salty breeze, her fingers trembling slightly, not from cold, but from a strange sense of anticipation. The research ship Aegis loomed ahead, its hull reflecting the moonlight like a silver ghost drifting in the darkness. She had boarded hundreds of ships before, yet tonight something felt different. There was an energy in the air, an unspoken tension that pricked her nerves. She shook her head. Perhaps it was just imagination, she told herself. Perhaps it was the thrill of the unknown. Stepping onto the gangplank, Sailor's boots echoed softly on the wooden deck. Her eyes scanned the ship, taking in the neat rows of equipment, the glint of instruments, the cold, metallic scent that always accompanied machinery. She tried to focus on her purpose, cataloging samples, taking notes, observing the crew, blending in, but instinct refused to let her relax. Something was off. She could feel it in her bones, a subtle vibration beneath her feet, a whisper of danger in the night air. She moved cautiously toward the main deck, her gaze lingering on the water, which shimmered like molten glass under the pale moonlight. A sudden shiver ran down her spine. It wasn't the wind, it was the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her. Her pulse quickened, and she drew in a slow, steadying breath, trying to quell the rising tide of fear. Meanwhile, high above the city skyline, Jaxon Creed stood on the balcony of his penthouse, overlooking the harbor. The night was his domain. Every deal, every secret, every heartbeat of the city pulsed beneath him, and he could feel it all. Jackson's storm-gray eyes narrowed as he observed the docks. His contacts had informed him of unusual activity aboard a research vessel, a ship he had intended to inspect personally as part of a deal that should have gone smoothly. His instincts prickled. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Down on the deck, Sailor clutched the railing, peering into the dark water. She had been so focused on her instruments that she hadn't noticed the subtle tremors along the hull. The ship shuddered slightly beneath her feet, and a strange groaning echoed from deep within the engine room. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure whether it was fear, anticipation, or the creeping realization that something was about to go terribly wrong. Without warning, the deck jolted violently. Sailor stumbled, arms flailing, as a deafening explosion ripped through the bow of the ship. Plumes of smoke erupted, and a shower of sparks rained down like fireflies gone mad. The world tilted, the wooden planks beneath her feet splitting and groaning under the strain. Crew members screamed, rushing in every direction, their faces twisted in panic and confusion. She felt herself sliding, the icy grip of the night air wrapping around her as she toppled toward the edge of the deck. Water surged violently around her legs as the ship tilted further. The freezing ocean roared beneath her, waves clawing at her body with relentless force. Panic gripped her chest as she fought to stay afloat, gasping for air, fighting the instinct to surrender to the icy embrace of the water. The cold burned, stole her strength, and the chaos above made it impossible to think clearly. Every second stretched into eternity, every heartbeat a drum of impending doom. Then, Through the storm of panic, she felt it. A hand, solid, unyielding, gripping her wrist with the force of a man who refused to let go. Her eyes shot open, meeting storm-gray orbs that burned into her very soul. He was enormous, broad-shouldered, and terrifyingly calm in the midst of chaos. Water dripped from his coat. His hair plastered to his face, but he moved with a precision and strength that seemed otherworldly. "You're not dying on me," the voice growled, low and commanding, reverberating through her chest. Every word was a tether pulling her out of the abyss. She blinked, struggling to reconcile the terror with the magnetic authority radiating from him. Who are you?" she stammered, shivering. "Somebody you should never cross," he replied, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "And somebody who just saved your life." His grip was unrelenting as he hoisted her onto the lifeboat. The ship behind them groaned ominously, splintering wood and twisted metal tearing through the night air. Smoke and fire twisted into the clouds above, illuminating the dark water in flickering, ominous shadows. Saylor's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from something she couldn't name, something electric in the way he looked at her, commanding, dangerous, yet strangely protective. The icy wind lashed her face, whipping her hair around, but she hardly noticed. Her entire focus was on him, the man who had pulled her from the jaws of death. She tried to steady herself, pressing her trembling hands against the lifeboat's edge. Every instinct screamed for survival, for rational thought, yet she felt her emotions spiraling into chaos. Jackson's eyes scanned the horizon, alert, calculating, aware of every potential threat. His empire, his power, his ruthless reputation, all of it had prepared him for danger, but never for a woman like Saylor. There was something about her courage, her fire, the defiance in her eyes, even as she clung to life, that intrigued him, that challenged him, that awakened something he had buried long ago. Saylor tried to speak, to make sense of what had just happened, but words failed her. The roar of the fire, the crackle of explosions, the desperate cries of the crew fading into the distance, it all blended into a surreal nightmare. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, one reality remained painfully clear. She was alive, because of him. He settled her into Timal. He lifeboat, wrapping a coat around her shoulders, his hands brushing against hers, lingering longer than necessary. There was an unspoken tension, a pull neither of them could ignore. Saylor's breath caught, not from the cold, but from the intensity of his gaze. "Stay close, or we're both dead," he muttered, his voice a low rumble that seemed to echo in her chest. There was no argument, no room for debate, just the raw, unyielding authority of a man who commanded life and death. She nodded, shivering, not entirely sure if it was from the cold or from the way her heart was racing in his presence. The lifeboat rocked gently in the waves, carrying them away from the burning wreck behind, into a night thick with uncertainty. As the flames consumed the Aegis, Saylor's mind raced. She had survived, yes, but at what cost? She didn't know his name, didn't know why he was here, didn't know why she felt drawn to him in a way that made her pulse thunder in her ears. The distant sirens of the harbor mingled with the crackling of the fire, but in this moment it was just the two of them, two souls tethered by fate, danger, and an unspoken attraction that neither could deny. Jaxon remained silent, scanning the horizon, every muscle coiled like a predator. The danger wasn't over, not by a long shot. Somewhere out there, enemies waited, watching, calculating. But for now, he had her, and he wasn't letting go. Saylor's teeth chattered, her body trembling from the cold, but she couldn't stop staring at him. There was something dangerous in his calm, something terrifyingly magnetic. She wanted to ask questions, to demand explanations, but she knew, somehow, that answers weren't hers to have, at least not yet. The waves carried them into darkness, the smoke of the burning ship fading behind them. Each splash against the lifeboat felt like a heartbeat, a reminder of mortality, of survival, of the strange, electrifying connection forming between rescuer and rescued. And then, out of the corner of her eye, She thought she saw it, a shadow at the far edge of the harbor, moving, silently, watching, waiting. Her heart leapt into her throat, fear mingling with the unnameable pull toward the man beside her. Jackson's eyes caught hers, storm gray and unflinching, reading her thoughts before she could speak. He gave a slight nod, and she understood. Danger was not behind them, it was still very much out there, and somehow, she was already part of it. For the first time in her life, Saylor realized that survival was only the beginning. A shadowy figure lingered on the harbor, hidden in the darkness, their eyes fixed on the lifeboat. The night was far from over, and the danger that had already upended Saylor's life was only beginning to tighten its grip. The waves carried them gently, rocking the lifeboat as the harbor lights blurred in the distance. Saylor's teeth still chattered from the cold, and her mind raced in a haze of adrenaline, confusion, and disbelief. She was alive, yes, but the reality of the night's events pressed down on her like a physical weight. She glanced at Jaxon, sitting silently at the edge of the boat, his coat still damp, his eyes scanning the horizon with the calm vigilance of a predator. He didn't speak, but she felt his presence like a tether. Every muscle in his body was coiled, ready to react to any threat that might emerge from the shadows. His silence was not cold, it was measured, deliberate. There was something unnerving in the way he observed, in the intensity of his gaze that seemed to dissect her thoughts before she could even form them. As the lifeboat nudged against the dock, Jackson's hand shot out, steadying it, his grip firm and authoritative. "Come on," he said, voice low and edged with command. "We move quickly. There's no time to linger." Saylor followed him, shivering, trying to steady her racing heart. The night air clung to her damp hair, and she felt the weight of fear and awe pressing against her chest. She had survived a sinking ship, and yet she felt more exposed now, stepping onto solid ground under his watchful gaze. Every step beside him made her pulse quicken, not entirely from fright. The safe house was an austere fortress nestled at the edge of the city, blending into the darkness with careful precision. Its high walls, surveillance cameras, and reinforced doors spoke of a life built on secrecy and caution. Jaxon moved with the confidence of someone born to command, leading her through the halls with silent authority. Each footfall echoed against marble floors, carrying the subtle warning, nothing here was ordinary, and she was now very much inside his world. Saylor's eyes darted around, taking in the sharp lines of modern architecture fused with security measures that whispered of danger. She felt a surge of apprehension. Questions pressed against her lips, but every time she opened her mouth, she faltered, intimidated by the silent power radiating from Jaxon. His presence was magnetic, almost suffocating, yet undeniably compelling. He paused near a large window overlooking the harbor, the faint moonlight casting shadows across his strong, chiseled face. He glanced at her briefly, and for a fraction of a second, the hard edge softened. There was a fleeting tenderness there, something fleeting and human that made her heart skip unexpectedly, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the same controlled intensity that had drawn her attention the moment he pulled her from the water. "You're safe now," he said finally, his voice low and measured. "But understand this, you're not entirely free. The world you've just entered, it doesn't forgive mistakes." Saylor swallowed hard, caught between awe and fear. She wanted to ask what he meant, why he was here, why she felt such a dangerous pull toward him, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she nodded slowly, feeling the weight of reality pressing down. From the shadows of the corridor, a voice broke the silence, rough and cautious. Ryder Holt emerged, his eyes narrowing at Saylor as he approached. "Boss," he said, tone edged with warning, "I don't like this. Trusting her is risky. She doesn't belong in this world." Jackson's jaw tightened, his gaze flicking to Ryder briefly before returning to Saylor. There was an unspoken tension between the two men, a silent debate playing out in a glance. Ryder's concern was practical, born of experience and loyalty, while Jackson's instincts were different, complex, magnetic, unpredictable. "She's staying," Jaxon said finally, his tone sharp and uncompromising. "And you'll respect that. She's under my protection. That's all you need to know." Ryder's lips pressed into a thin line, but he nodded reluctantly. "Understood," he muttered, though his eyes never left Saylor, as if measuring her potential to be a threat or an asset. Lila Sterling, Jackson's younger sister and the tech genius of the operation, stepped into the room quietly, her presence softer, but no less commanding. Her eyes met Saylor's, and she offered a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval. There was warmth in her gaze, a subtle signal that, despite the warnings, someone here saw potential in her survival, intelligence, and courage. Saylor felt a flicker of relief, but it was tempered by the lingering awareness that she was surrounded by people whose loyalties and motives she could barely begin to understand. Every smile, every gesture, carried layers of meaning she didn't yet grasp. Jaxon led her to a modest sitting area, a room sparsely furnished but luxurious, with dark leather couches and minimalistic decor. He gestured for her to sit, but she hesitated, the chill from the night clinging stubbornly to her skin. He waited, patient yet commanding, until she finally lowered herself onto the couch. She glanced around, noting subtle details. The high-tech security panel hidden behind a painting, the reinforced walls, the faint hum of surveillance systems. This was a fortress, yes, but it was also a home ruled by a man who lived by his own code, whose charm and danger coexisted in a delicate, intoxicating balance. Jaxon remained standing, leaning casually against the wall, arms crossed. His eyes never left her, and she felt the intensity of his scrutiny like a physical force. It unnerved her, but it also drew her in. There was something addictive about the way he looked at her, something that made her pulse race and her thoughts scatter. "I need to know who you are," Saylor said finally, her voice trembling slightly but carrying the edge of defiance. Why did you save me? Why should I trust you?" Jackson's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. "You don't need to trust me, not yet. All you need to do is survive. The rest, we'll see." She wanted to push further, to demand answers, but instinct told her to be cautious. She had just been pulled from death, thrust into a world of danger and shadows, and this man, this irresistible, terrifying man, held all the cards. The tension between them was palpable, a current of electricity that neither could deny. She wanted to step back, to run from the intensity that made her stomach twist with both fear and desire. But she also found herself leaning forward, drawn to him despite every rational thought. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the distant hum of the city beyond the safe-house walls. Saylor studied him, noting the sharp planes of his face, the way his jaw tensed, the fleeting glimpses of emotion that betrayed a humanity beneath the hardened exterior. She wondered what stories lay hidden behind those storm-gray eyes, what pain and power coexisted in that brooding, magnetic presence. Ryder paced in the background, muttering warnings, while Lila busied herself with her devices, occasionally casting approving glances at Saylor. The contrast between caution and acceptance created a tension that Saylor could feel, an invisible web of alliances, suspicions, and judgments. Finally, curiosity overcame caution. Saylor's hand brushed against a small envelope tucked beneath a stack of papers on a side table. She hesitated, then carefully slid it out. The paper was aged, slightly yellowed, and tied with a thin red ribbon. Her hands trembled as she untied it, revealing photographs of a man she instantly recognized. Her father. A note fell from between the photos, the handwriting familiar yet menacing. Her eyes scanned the words, and her breath caught in her throat. The note connected her father to Jackson's enemies, revealing secrets she had never imagined, and a danger that now included her family. Her heart pounded, a mixture of fear, disbelief, and rising anger. Questions exploded in her mind, each more urgent than the last. How deep did this connection go? How much of her life had been shaped by forces she had never understood? And most importantly, could she ever truly trust the man who had saved her life, but whose world now threatened everything she held dear? Saylor's gaze lifted to Jaxon, who remained silent, watching her intently. His storm-gray eyes seemed to pierce her very soul, and she realized, with a sinking feeling, that nothing would ever be the same again. She was trapped in a world of power, danger, and attraction, and the first steps of a story far more complicated than she had imagined were already unfolding. Saylor clutched the envelope to her chest, her mind racing. The photographs and note revealed a connection she never expected, her father's past intertwined with Jackson's enemies. She realized, with growing dread, that survival was no longer the only danger. Trust, betrayal, and secrets threatened to consume her next. Saylor sat frozen for a long moment, the envelope clutched tightly against her chest. Her mind spun, a storm of confusion, fear, and rising panic. Her father's face flashed in her memory, the warmth of his smile, the lessons he had taught her. And now, this, hidden truths, connecting him to dangerous people she barely understood. She looked up, her eyes meeting Jackson's storm-gray gaze, and she felt a chill that wasn't from the night air anymore. There was something in his expression, a flicker of something she couldn't read, that made her heart skip in ways she didn't expect. Jaxon remained still, his presence a solid anchor in the room, yet something about the intensity of his scrutiny made her feel both exposed and protected at once. She realized with sudden clarity that there was no turning back. The moment she had been thrust into this world, she had crossed a line she could never uncross. She began, her voice trembling. I didn't know. My father. She trailed off, unsure how to explain, how to confess, how to navigate the enormity of what she had just discovered. Jackson's gaze softened fractionally, the barest hint of something vulnerable behind the commanding exterior. Your father's choices are not yours, he said, his tone calm but firm. But you need to understand the world you've stumbled into. One wrong move, one slip, and it could cost you everything. Saylor swallowed hard, trying to steady her trembling hands. I don't understand. Why am I here? Why me? What does this have to do with you? Jaxon stepped closer, the weight of his presence pressing in, magnetic and terrifying. Because you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and now you're in mine, he said, his voice low, measured, deliberate. I saved your life, and now it's my responsibility to ensure you survive. Whether you like it or not, you're part of this world now. The words sent a shiver down her spine, both frightening and thrilling. She wanted to argue, to resist, but the reality of the sinking ship, the chaos, and his undeniable strength pressed heavily upon her. She was no longer just a bystander. Her choices had consequence. And those consequences were intertwined with him, this dangerous, commanding, impossible man. Ryder Holt entered the room then, his expression sharp, his eyes darting between Saylor and Jaxon. Boss, he said cautiously, you need to understand what you're doing. She doesn't belong here, not fully. She doesn't understand the risks, the rules. Letting her linger could compromise everything. Jackson's jaw tightened imperceptibly, and for a moment the storm-gray eyes softened into something unreadable. I know what I'm doing, he said. I choose to keep her close. That's final. Saylor watched the interaction with growing unease. The tension was palpable, a taut thread stretched between loyalty, caution, and danger. She realized that every person in this room had their own motivations, and she was a pawn caught in the center of a world she didn't yet fully understand. Lila Sterling appeared next, quiet, composed, a stark contrast to Ryder's restless energy. She approached Saylor and offered a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. There was approval in her gaze, a quiet acknowledgement that Saylor's courage, resourcefulness, and sharp mind could make her a valuable ally, if she could survive long enough to prove it. Saylor's heart raced, trying to reconcile the mixed signals. Ryder's warning, Lila's subtle encouragement, and Jackson's magnetic, dominating presence. It was confusing, overwhelming, and intoxicating. She felt herself pulled in every direction, a mixture of fear and curiosity that made her chest tighten. Jaxon moved to the window, arms crossed, watching the dark harbor outside. The faint moonlight illuminated the hard planes of his face, casting shadows that made him appear both vulnerable and lethal at once. Saylor felt drawn to him, irresistibly, even as terror and uncertainty threatened to consume her. "You need to know the truth," he said finally, turning his piercing gaze to her. Declan Wolfe orchestrated the sabotage of the Aegis. He's ruthless, calculating, and he'll stop at nothing to hurt me, and anyone connected to me. That include? Des you now. The weight of his words pressed down like a physical force. She tried to comprehend it all. The shipwreck, the explosions, the danger she had narrowly survived. And now this. She felt her stomach twist, a mixture of fear and disbelief. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why target a research vessel? Why risk so many lives?" "Because you were there," Jaxon said simply, his tone carrying a dark finality, "and because your presence, your choices, matter in ways you don't yet understand. There's more at play here than you can imagine." Her eyes widened. More than she could imagine? She wanted to protest, to demand answers, but the intensity in his eyes made words fail. Every fiber of her being screamed both to run and to stay, caught in the pull of a man whose presence was as intoxicating as it was terrifying. At that moment, her phone buzzed sharply. Saylor hesitated, glancing at the screen, and her stomach dropped. The message preview alone made her pulse jump. "Stay away, or face consequences you can't survive. DW." Her hands shook as she showed it to Jaxon. His storm-gray eyes darkened instantly, a dangerous intensity surfacing. Every instinct in him shifted from measured calm to lethal focus. He grabbed the phone, reading the threat, and a low, menacing growl escaped him, reverberating through the room. "This is exactly why you don't touch her," Ryder muttered from the background, his tension tight as a drawn bowstring. "Declan is relentless. He won't stop." Jackson's jaw clenched, and he turned to Saylor. His gaze softened ever so slightly. "Do you understand now? Your life, your very existence, is tied to the decisions I make from this point forward. You're not just caught in my world, you're inside it, fully. And there's no turning back." Saylor's chest tightened, the enormity of the situation pressing down. Fear mixed with adrenaline, attraction mingled. With uncertainty, she was trapped, yet strangely alive in a way she had never felt before. Her thoughts raced, trust, survival, danger, and an undeniable pull toward the man who had both saved and claimed her life in ways she could not yet define. The room fell silent for a long moment, only the soft hum of security systems and the distant sounds of the city breaking the quiet. Each person present carried their own weight of concern, suspicion, or loyalty, and Saylor felt the threads of this tangled world tugging at her from all directions. She wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, to make sense of the chaos and the danger surrounding her, but instinct told her there were rules, boundaries, and power she had yet to understand. One misstep could cost her life, or worse. Jaxon stepped closer, his shadow falling across her as he reached toward her. The magnetic force of his presence made her heart race uncontrollably. She felt the tension in the room, the silent debates, the warnings, and yet she could not tear her gaze from him. "You'll learn the rules soon enough," he said quietly, almost gently, "and you'll learn why trust is a luxury you can't afford. But for now, survive." Saylor nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words settle into her bones. She understood the danger, the power, the complexity of the world she had just been pulled into. Fear and fascination warred within her, leaving her unsettled, yet undeniably alive. Her gaze flicked to Ryder, who continued to pace, muttering warnings under his breath. Then to Lila, who offered nothing more than a quiet, encouraging look. And finally to Jaxon, whose presence was impossible to ignore, a mix of danger and strange tenderness that left her dizzy with conflicting emotions. Her fingers unconsciously touched the envelope again, the photographs and note a stark reminder that her life had been forever altered. She realized that knowledge was both a shield and a curse, and that every decision she made from now on would carry consequences she could not yet predict. The silence stretched, thickened, heavy, until it was broken by the distant hum of movement outside the safe house. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified by her heightened senses. Fear and adrenaline surged, a reminder that nothing was as it seemed and that danger could strike at any moment. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the events of the night, the revelations about her father, and the undeniable pull toward the man who had claimed her survival, and perhaps something far more complicated than that. Her phone buzzed again. A new message appeared, colder, more menacing. Stay away, or next time, survival isn't an option. D.W. Saylor's hands trembled as dread coiled in her stomach. Declan Wolfe was closing in, and she realized with a sinking fear that the life she thought she understood was gone forever. The phone slipped from Saylor's trembling hand, clattering onto the marble floor as the echo carried through the dimly lit safe house. Jackson's head snapped up instantly, his instincts sharper than the silence that followed. His eyes locked on her face, pale, terrified, and frozen. "What happened?" he demanded, already moving toward her. She tried to speak, but before her lips formed the words, the world exploded. A single bullet shattered the glass window behind them. The deafening crack tore through the night, followed by a hail of gunfire that sent shards flying across the room like deadly rain. Saylor dropped instinctively, her heart hammering, the metallic taste of fear filling her mouth. Jaxon was already in motion, pulling her behind the thick oak table, his body shielding hers. His voice was sharp, controlled, the voice of a man born for war. "Ryder! Caden! Perimeter breach!" Saylor's pulse raced so hard she thought she might pass out. The chaos was a blur, boots pounding, gunfire cracking, shouts of command echoing through the halls. She could feel Jackson's steady breath against her ear as he crouched low beside her, one hand gripping his gun, the other steadying her trembling shoulder. "Stay down, Saylor," he said, his tone a mixture of command and something softer, protective, dangerous, magnetic. "No matter what happens, you don't move." The air thickened with the smell of smoke and gunpowder. Lila's voice rang out from another room, urgent and precise, guiding the security systems into lockdown. Metal shutters began to descend over the windows, but the intruders had already broken through the outer fence. Caden Pierce burst through the hallway, his face grim beneath the flickering emergency lights. "Boss, they've breached the east wing." He fired a clean shot, dropping a masked intruder before the man could even raise his weapon. Saylor flinched, her heart aching at the sight of so much violence, yet awe rippled through her. These men moved like shadows, lethal and loyal, every motion calculated. This wasn't chaos for them. It was survival. It was Creed. Jaxon rose halfway, returning fire with ruthless precision. His every move was deliberate, fluid, a man who had fought too many wars to hesitate. Saylor watched, her fear shifting into something else entirely, respect, fascination, and a dangerous spark of attraction she couldn't suppress. The man who terrified the underworld was now risking everything to keep her alive. She wanted to scream, to beg him to hide, but he turned just long enough to catch her eyes. "Breathe, Saylor," he said, his voice calm amidst the storm. "I need you to trust me." Trust him. The words settled in her like a heartbeat. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, she did. Another explosion ripped through the corridor, throwing her off balance. Smoke filled the air, blinding and thick. Caden appeared beside her, pulling her up. "We need to move, now." "I can't leave him," she cried, glancing back toward Jaxon, who was firing from behind a pillar. Caden's voice was a growl of frustration. "He'll find you. That's his job. Mine is to make sure you don't die before he does." He dragged her through the narrow passage as bullets tore through the walls. Every step felt endless. The sound of gunfire followed them like thunder. Saylor stumbled, nearly falling, but Caden caught her, steady and sure. "Keep your head low. "We're not losing you tonight," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. They reached the reinforced hallway leading to the underground exit. The door control blinked red, locked. "Damn it," Caden muttered, tapping his earpiece. "Lila, open gate 3 now." A beat of silence. Then Lila's voice crackled through the speaker. "Systems are fried. You'll have to override manually." Caden swore under his breath and knelt by the panel. "Cover me." Saylor blinked through tears, gripping the wall for support. The world outside felt like it was collapsing. Every echo, every flash of light, every shout pulled her deeper into Jackson's brutal world. A gunshot rang out behind her. She turned, and her breath caught. A masked man was approaching fast, gun raised. Panic surged through her chest. Before she could even scream, Jackson appeared out of the smoke, silent and deadly. He tackled the intruder, slammed him against the wall, and fired once. The man crumpled instantly. Jackson's chest heaved, his jaw tight, his eyes wild and burning. When he turned to Saylor, his voice was pure fury. "I told you to stay down." Tears burned her eyes. "I was being taken to safety." He grabbed her wrist, not roughly, but with enough force to make her heart jump. "There is no safety without me," he growled. "You understand that now?" She wanted to protest, but the raw emotion in his voice silenced her. She could see it, the fear he would never admit, the desperation buried beneath control. He wasn't angry at her defiance. He was terrified of losing her. Caden finally got the door open, shouting, "Move! Now!" Jackson pushed Saylor through, firing one last shot before slamming the door behind them. The corridor beyond was quieter, lined with flickering lights. The silence felt deafening after the chaos. Saylor pressed her back to the wall, gasping for breath. Her whole body shook, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Is it over?" she whispered. Jackson wiped blood from his knuckles, his expression hard. "Not yet. Declan wouldn't waste this many men without a reason." He stepped closer, his voice dropping low. "This attack wasn't random. He wanted to see how far I'd go to protect you." Her heart thudded painfully. "Me? Why?" Jackson looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his gaze. "Because you mean something to him, or to someone he's working with." She swallowed hard. "And what do I mean to you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. The air between them changed instantly. His jaw tensed, his eyes softened just slightly, the walls of control faltering for a breath. "You shouldn't ask questions you're not ready to hear the answers to," he said softly. But his hand lingered at her cheek for just a second longer than necessary, his thumb brushing a stray tear away. That touch, gentle amidst the chaos, made her chest ache. They heard footsteps pounding from the far end of the tunnel. Ryder's voice called out, "We've got 2 more down outside. Declan's pulling back." Jackson straightened, his command mask returning instantly. "Let him run," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "He's not done playing, and neither am I." Saylor exhaled shakily, every nerve alive. She couldn't look away from him, this man who killed without hesitation, yet shielded her with the same ferocity. In that moment, something inside her shifted. Fear still lived in her veins, but it mixed with something else, something impossible to ignore. Attraction, trust, the terrifying beginnings of love. When Caden handed her a jacket, his voice was gruff but kind. "You handled yourself better than most. You'll fit right in if you stay long enough." She managed a weak smile. "That's not the plan." Caden gave a short laugh. "That's what they all say." As the team regrouped in the underground garage, the smell of gasoline and smoke still clung to the air. Jackson barked orders, every command sharp and precise, but his eyes flicked to Saylor often, as if to make sure she was still there, still breathing. She watched him, her heart torn between fear and fascination. In his world, loyalty was currency and trust was suicide, yet she could feel herself falling into the very danger he embodied. The night was far from over. The safe house was compromised, lives were lost, and lines had been crossed. But somewhere between gunfire and silence, something fragile had been born, something neither of them wanted to name. As the crew loaded into black SUVs, a guard handed Jaxon a blood-stained envelope retrieved from the last intruder's pocket. Jaxon tore it open, his expression hardening. Inside was a single note written in crimson ink. "Next time, I won't miss. The girl dies first. D.W." He looked up slowly, meeting Saylor's frightened eyes. For the first time, she saw it, the flicker of fear behind the Reaper's mask. The night after the attack was eerily quiet. Smoke still clung to the air around the safe house ruins, and the echo of gunfire haunted the silence between Saylor and Jaxon. He hadn't spoken much since Declan's men escaped, only issuing curt orders and ensuring everyone made it out alive. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, streaked with blood, not all his own. Saylor couldn't take her eyes off him. He looked both unstoppable and broken, a contradiction that drew her in deeper with every heartbeat. They retreated to a hidden cabin nestled deep in the woods, a place only Jaxon and his most trusted men knew existed. It wasn't luxurious like his city penthouse, but it felt safe. The heavy scent of pine and rain filled the air, mixing with the soft crackle of firewood. Saylor wrapped herself in one of Jackson's black sweaters, its fabric too big but impossibly comforting. She could still smell him on it, leather, danger, and something intoxicatingly human. Jaxon paced by the window, gun at his hip, eyes on the shadows outside. "You shouldn't have seen that," he muttered finally, his voice rough like gravel dragged over stone. "Seen what?" she asked quietly. "The part of me that kills to protect." His gaze met hers for a second before drifting away. "The part that ruins everything it touches." She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she'd seen more than just a killer that night. She'd seen a man ready to die for someone else, but the words stuck in her throat. So she stepped closer, just enough for her voice to carry warmth. "Maybe not everything you touch is ruined, Jaxon." He turned then, his eyes sharp but softer than before. The firelight painted gold across his cheekbones, glinting off the scar near his jaw. "You don't understand, Saylor," he said, his tone low. "People close to me don't survive long." "Then stop pushing them away." The silence after her words was heavy, filled with unspoken things. She could feel the tension between them shifting, no longer just fear or gratitude, but something deeper, magnetic. As the rain began to fall harder outside, Saylor sat on the edge of the couch, watching him through the dim light. "Why do you trust so few?" she finally asked. He hesitated before answering. "Because I learned the hard way that loyalty has a price. My brother betrayed me. My father sold me out to the enemy. Everyone I've ever cared for either left or died." His voice cracked on the last word, barely audible, like something he hadn't said aloud in years. Something in Saylor's chest ached. She rose and walked to him, standing so close she could feel the heat of his body. "You don't have to face all of this alone." For the first time, his mask slipped. His hand came up, hesitating before brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. His touch was gentle, too gentle for a man built of rage and vengeance. Her breath caught, their eyes locked. The air between them thickened, charged with electricity and everything they both tried to deny. She could hear his heartbeat, steady, strong, yet trembling under restraint. "You should rest," he whispered, though his voice carried no conviction. "I can't," she replied softly. "Not when you look at me like that." He swallowed hard, his jaw clenched as though fighting something inside him. Then he turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You don't know what you're saying?" But she did. Every part of her knew exactly what she was saying, even if it scared her. She took a slow step forward. "Maybe I shouldn't," she said, her tone trembling but steady. "But I can't stop feeling it." He faced her again, eyes dark and stormy. In 2 strides he was in front of her. His hand cupped the side of her neck, thumb brushing her jawline. She could barely breathe. His scent, his warmth, it all consumed her. "Saylor," he murmured, as if warning her and himself at once. The moment stretched. His lips hovered inches from hers. The world seemed to hold its breath. The fire crackled, rain whispered against the window, and her pulse thundered in her ears. Then he stopped, his hand trembling as he pulled back. "If I touch you now, I won't be able to stop," he said hoarsely. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. "Then maybe you shouldn't." Their eyes met again, locked in a silent war between desire and control. The tension between them wasn't just attraction, it was survival, trust, and a pull neither of them understood. But he turned away, jaw tight. "Get some sleep," he said, walking to the far side of the room. "We move again at dawn." Saylor didn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to the storm outside and the steady rhythm of his breathing across the room. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the look in his, the battle between wanting her and protecting her from himself. At some point, she rose and walked to the window. Outside, the forest was cloaked in fog. She didn't notice the faint glimmer of light far beyond the trees, a reflection from a distant scope. Hours passed before Jaxon finally spoke again, voice low in the dark. "If anything happens to me, Caden will get you to safety. Don't argue, just do it." Her throat tightened. "Don't talk like that." "I have to," he said, standing to look out beside her. "Declan's not done. He never quits until he gets what he wants." "And what does he want?" she asked quietly. His answer came in a whisper that made her shiver. "You." Her breath hitched, but before she could reply, his phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up, eyes narrowing at the encrypted message on the screen. The color drained from his face. Jaxon turned the screen toward her. On it was a photo of her, taken through the cabin window just moments ago. Beneath it, a message from Declan glowed in red letters. "You can't hide her forever. She's next." The night was thick with tension, heavy enough to choke on. The safe house had fallen into an uneasy silence after Jackson's last call, the air cold and restless. Saylor sat near the window, her reflection fractured by raindrops sliding down the glass. Her thoughts were tangled between fear, guilt, and the haunting memory of Jackson's eyes when he said he'd protect her, no matter the cost. But somewhere deep inside, she felt a storm brewing, one that had nothing to do with the weather outside. Marin's visit had seemed innocent, a trembling survivor seeking comfort, holding a broken arm and an apologetic smile. Saylor had rushed to her, unaware that behind those eyes lived something sharp, something bought. Marin asked about her safety, about Jaxon, about where they were hiding. Every word Saylor shared, each one wrapped in kindness, was a breadcrumb leading straight to Declan Wolfe. Hours later, the betrayal unfolded like a nightmare. A crash split the quiet. Windows shattered, the door exploded inward, and masked men flooded the room like shadows with guns. Saylor screamed, as one grabbed her, pressing cold steel to her neck. "Don't fight," a voice hissed, low and cruel. The scent of gasoline and gunpowder filled the air. She caught a glimpse of Jackson's men firing back, Ryder shouting orders, Caden pulling his weapon and dragging her toward the hallway. But she never reached it. A hit to her temple sent the world spinning into black. When she awoke, everything felt wrong. Her wrists ached, her vision blurred. She was inside a warehouse, metal walls, dim lights, and the faint hum of engines. Her hands were chained to a post, the floor wet beneath her knees. Fear crawled up her spine. Her first thought was Jaxon. Would he come for her? Could he find her? Back at the safe house, Jaxon stood among the wreckage. His chest rose and fell like a wild animal's, eyes black with rage. "Who talked?" he growled, his voice low but venomous. No one answered until Ryder muttered Marin's name. The word hit like a bullet. Jackson's jaw tightened. "Find her." When they brought Marin in, terrified, shaking, eyes darting everywhere, Jaxon didn't need to ask. The truth was written all over her face. "I didn't mean to," she cried, but he didn't flinch. "You sold her out to Wolfe," he said, his tone flat, cold. "You just signed your death sentence." Ryder looked away. Even Lila, standing near the computer screens, went pale. Meanwhile, in that dark room, Saylor fought against her restraints until her wrists bled. She could hear footsteps above, the creak of metal, the faint echo of laughter. Declan's men were near. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Jaxon will come." She didn't know that Jaxon was already on his way, tearing through the city like a storm. He called every contact, raided 2 of Declan's warehouses, and burned through rival territories like vengeance made flesh. He wasn't thinking, he was hunting. Lila worked the coordinates from a signal tracker Caden had planted in Saylor's necklace. When the red dot blinked alive on the screen, Jaxon grabbed his gun and didn't wait for backup. Ryder tried to stop him. "Boss, if you go in alone, you're dead." Jaxon turned, eyes burning. "Then I'll die getting her back." Saylor, chained and trembling, heard a door creak open. Boots echoed closer, slow and deliberate. Declan stepped out of the shadows, dressed in black, his smile curved like a blade. "Miss Quinn," he purred, "we meet again." She glared at him, refusing to speak, but he moved closer until his breath brushed her cheek. "You've caused quite a stir. Jaxon Creed tearing the city apart for a woman? Remarkable." His eyes glinted. "I can see why. You have that same fire your father did." Her body froze. "What did you just say?" Declan laughed, pulling a folded photo from his coat. It was old, water-stained, a picture of her father shaking hands with Declan himself. "Did Jaxon tell you the truth? That your dear father once worked for my cartel? That his betrayal cost me millions and started this whole war?" Saylor's heart slammed in her chest. Her father? Her breath caught. The walls seemed to tilt around her. "You're lying," she whispered, but Declan only smirked. "Am I?" Outside, tires screeched as Jackson's convoy stopped near the dock. He kicked the door open, his gun drawn, eyes searching through the darkness. His heart pounded with every step. He could almost feel her fear, the invisible pull between them dragging him deeper into the fire. Saylor struggled against the chains, tears burning in her eyes, fury twisting through her veins. "What do you want from me?" she spat. Declan crouched, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Revenge," he murmured. "And maybe to watch Creed lose what little heart he has left." Jackson's silhouette appeared outside the warehouse, and with it came the faint hum of death. He motioned his men into position, but before he could make his move, a voice on the radio crackled through, Declan's voice. "Looking for someone, Creed? She's waiting for you, and she knows everything now." Jaxon froze. His blood went cold. What did that mean? Everything. Inside, Saylor's world shattered. Declan's words sliced through her like glass. The man who'd saved her life, who'd held her trembling hands, had hidden the truth about her father. The same man whose past was intertwined with this bloody world. Her mind spiraled with disbelief, betrayal, and heartbreak. She had wanted to trust Jaxon, to believe he was different, but maybe he wasn't saving her out of mercy. Maybe it was guilt. Declan's laughter echoed through the room, cruel and knowing. "You see, Saylor, you were never just a victim. You were part of the game from the beginning." Her chest heaved, tears streaking her cheeks. In the dim light, her chains rattled as she tried to break free, rage replacing fear. She screamed his name, not in desperation, but in fury. "Jaxon!" And somewhere beyond the steel doors, he heard it. Her voice, raw, breaking, desperate. He moved faster. The night exploded in gunfire. Declan stepped closer, his smile widening as he held the photograph up to Saylor's face. "He didn't just know your father, Saylor," he whispered, voice low and poisonous. "He killed him." The sound of Declan's words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. "He killed him." The words replayed in Saylor's mind again and again, each repetition striking her like a blade. She stared at Declan through blurred tears, her body trembling against the chains that bit into her wrists. Her father, dead because of Jaxon Creed? The man who had pulled her from the sea, who had held her as if she were the only thing left in his world. Could he really be the same man who destroyed hers? Declan smirked, savoring the pain on her face. "Oh, the truth stings, doesn't it?" he murmured, crouching before her. "Creed is not your savior, Saylor. He's the reason your father's body was found, floating in the same ocean he dragged you from." His eyes glittered with malice. "And the best part? He doesn't even regret it." Saylor shook her head violently. "You're lying," she hissed, her voice breaking. "You're trying to turn me against him." Declan's laugh was cold and hollow. "Sweetheart, I don't need to. Creed's lies will do that all by themselves." Before she could speak, the heavy metal doors blew open with a deafening crash. The warehouse filled with smoke and chaos. Gunfire erupted, echoing off the steel walls like thunder. Saylor's heart leapt. She knew that sound. Jaxon was here. Through the haze, she caught a glimpse of him. Dressed in black, eyes wild with fury, moving like death itself. His men stormed the building, shouting commands, bullets tearing through the air. Declan's guards dropped one by one, but Declan didn't flinch. He smiled, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. Saylor struggled, pulling against her chains, desperate to reach Jaxon. "Jaxon!" she screamed, her voice raw. He turned at the sound, eyes locking on her. For a split second, everything else disappeared. The gunfire, the screams, the blood. All that existed was her. He charged forward, shooting the lock on her chains, the metal snapping open as sparks flew. She fell into his arms, gasping for air. But before she could speak, Declan's voice cut through the noise. "Tell her the truth, Creed." Jaxon froze. Declan stood a few feet away, a gun aimed directly at them, his smirk never faltering. "Tell her how her father begged for mercy before you pulled the trigger." Saylor's breath hitched. Her gaze darted to Jaxon's face. He didn't answer. His jaw tightened, eyes flickering with something. Pain, guilt, regret. That silence said more than words ever could. Declan laughed softly. "There it is," he whispered. "The truth, right from his silence." "Enough!" Jaxon roared, firing a shot. The bullet grazed Declan's arm, but the man didn't fall. Instead, he retreated behind a steel column, still laughing. "You can kill me, Creed, but she'll never see you the same. Alain." Gain. The fight intensified. Jackson's men advanced, covering him as he pulled Saylor toward the exit. Caden appeared from the shadows, returning fire. "We've got to move," he shouted. Outside, the night was ablaze with fire and flashing lights. The dock burned where Declan's men had set traps. The smell of smoke and gunpowder clung to the air. Jaxon pushed Saylor toward an armored car, shouting orders into his comm. But she couldn't stop staring at him, at the man who had just risked everything to save her, yet might have stolen her father's life. Her mind warred with itself, torn between the man she feared and the one she loved. "Tell me it's not true," she whispered, voice trembling. Jaxon didn't look at her. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Not now, Saylor." "That's not an answer," she said sharply. "Did you kill him?" Silence. Only the roar of the engine filled the space between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, rough. "Your father made choices that got people killed. I was ordered to end it before it destroyed more lives." Tears welled in her eyes. "You executed him," she whispered, "like he was nothing." Jackson's jaw clenched. "He was my friend once," he said softly. "I didn't want to. But in this world, mercy gets you buried." The words shattered her. She turned away, pressing her trembling hands to her mouth. The image of her father's smile, his laughter, collided with the reality of the man driving beside her. The man she'd begun to love. Jaxon reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Don't touch me," she snapped, her voice cracking. "You saved me from that ship, but you destroyed me long before that." The car went silent. His eyes flickered with pain, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. He knew she was right. As they reached another safe house deep in the countryside, Jackson's crew secured Toitiam's perimeter. Ryder gave a nod of assurance, but the air between Jaxon and Saylor remained heavy, suffocating. Inside, the firelight flickered across their faces. She sat on the couch, staring into the flames, her mind miles away. Jaxon stood across the room, watching her silently, unsure how to bridge the distance. Every word he could say felt like a lie. Every truth felt like a wound. Finally, Saylor broke the silence. "You can kill men, build empires, and control everything around you, but you can't undo this," she said softly. "You can't undo what you did to me." Jaxon stepped closer, his voice low. "You don't understand the choices I've had to make." Her eyes lifted, shining with tears. "I understand enough." Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. A storm was brewing. one that mirrored the war between them. Jaxon turned toward the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. "Declan won't stop," he said finally. "He'll come for you again." Saylor stood, wrapping her arms around herself. "Maybe he should," she murmured. "Maybe it's the only way this ends." He spun toward her, eyes flashing. "Don't say that. Don't ever say that." But her expression didn't change. Her voice was soft, almost broken. "Then stop keeping me in the dark. If you want to protect me, tell me everything. Every secret. Every lie." Jaxon looked at her for a long moment, torn between the man he was and the man he wished he could be. He wanted to tell her everything, but some truths were poison, and once spilled, they could never be contained. As the wind howled outside, Saylor turned away, whispering, "I don't know if I can trust you anymore." And for the first time in years, Jaxon Creed had no words. Lightning flashed through the window, illuminating a shadow across the field. A lone figure stood watching the safe house through the rain. Declan Wolfe, alive and smiling, holding a phone. He whispered into it, "She won't make it to sunrise." The night stretched long and merciless outside the safe house. Rain poured against the windows in a steady rhythm, the kind that made silent land. Sea feel heavier. Saylor sat near the fireplace, the crackle of burning wood barely cutting through the storm's whispers. Her hands were wrapped around a mug of untouched tea, her gaze lost somewhere in the flames. Each flicker seemed to mirror the chaos burning inside her. Jaxon stood at the window, staring out into the darkness. His jaw was tight, his reflection fractured by raindrops sliding down the glass. He could sense it, the unease crawling under his skin, the instinct that danger was circling closer. He'd lived too long in shadows to ignore that kind of feeling. Ryder entered the room quietly, his boots dripping water onto the wooden floor. "The perimeter's clear," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "No movement, no signs." Jaxon didn't turn. "That doesn't mean we're safe." Ryder exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "You think Wolf will try again tonight?" "I don't think," Jaxon muttered. "I know." Saylor's eyes lifted toward them. Her voice was quiet, brittle. "So this is how it feels, to live hunted." Jaxon looked at her then, his expression softening despite himself. "It's how I've lived for years," he said. "But I never wanted you to know this part of it." She met his gaze, her heart twisting. Too late for that. The thunder outside rolled deeper now, like a warning. Lila entered the room, a laptop in hand, her usually calm face drawn tight with worry. "Jax," she said quickly, "I think you need to see this." He strode over, his focus sharpening. On the screen was a grainy live feed from one of the perimeter cameras. A shadow moved across the tree line, then another. Several figures, dark and fast, closing in from multiple directions. "Positions," Jaxon barked, his voice snapping through the house like a whip. Ryder pulled his gun, Caden checked the ammo, and Lila ducked behind the desk to secure the system. The air thickened with Adre, Nayline, and fear. Saylor stood, heart pounding. "What's happening?" "They found us," Jaxon said simply. His tone carried no panic, just certainty. He grabbed her arm, leading her toward the back hall. "You stay with me. Don't argue." She didn't. Not this time. The first gunshot shattered the window. Glass rained across the floor as shouts erupted outside. Ryder fired back from the doorway, shouting orders to the men stationed outside. The quiet countryside erupted into war. Jaxon pulled Saylor behind the kitchen counter as bullets tore through the walls. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. His hand brushed her cheek, grounding her. "You stay down. You move when I say." Her voice trembled. "What about you?" His lips twitched with a grim smirk. "I'm not dying tonight." Outside, Caden returned fire, dropping 2 of Declan's men near the tree line, but more were coming. Dozens, it seemed. They moved like shadows, coordinated and relentless. Lila yelled over the noise, "They're cutting the power!" The lights flickered, then died, plunging the house into darkness. The only illumination came from the storm outside, flashes of lightning revealing brief snapshots of chaos, the muzzle flash from Ryder's gun, the glint of rain on the floor, the determined focus in Jaxon's eyes. He moved like a predator in the dark, his instincts guiding him. He fired with precision, each shot deliberate, each step protective. Saylor followed his lead, her fear slowly giving way to something stronger: trust. But that trust was tested when a door at the far end of the hallway burst open. Declan's men stormed in, two of them lunging for her. Saylor screamed as one grabbed her arm. Before she could react, Jaxon was there, grabbing the man by the collar and slamming him against the wall. The sound of the impact echoed like thunder. "Touch her again," Jaxon growled, "and you'll never move another muscle." He fired point blank. The man dropped. Saylor stared at him, breathless, shaken, yet unable to look away. That fury, that darkness, it terrified her, but it also reminded her of why Say. He couldn't stay away. The storm outside grew fiercer, the wind howling like the city itself was alive and watching. "Basement," Jaxon shouted to the others. "Fall back now." They retreated through the kitchen, Lila carrying her laptop, Ryder covering their rear. Explosions rocked the outside as Declan's men threw grenades into the yard. The safe house was no longer safe. It was becoming a trap. In the narrow stairwell, Saylor clung to Jackson's arm as they descended into the dim underground room. The walls trembled above them. Dust fell from the ceiling. Lila slammed the door shut and locked it from the inside. The emergency lights glowed red, bathing their faces in an eerie hue. Saylor turned to Jaxon, her voice shaking. "How do they keep finding us?" He hesitated. "Someone's feeding him information." Her eyes widened. "Inside?" Jaxon nodded grimly. "Someone close." Ryder cursed under his breath. "If Wolf's got a mole in our circle, we're screwed." Jaxon paced, trying to think, trying to stay ahead of Declan's next move. But his mind kept circling back to Saylor, to the way her breath caught in fear, the way she looked at him like she didn't know whether to hate him or hold him. He turned to her, his voice low but fierce. "No matter what happens tonight, I need you to trust me. I'll get you out of this." Her eyes shimmered, a tear escaping down her cheek. "I want to believe that, Jaxon. I really do." Suddenly, the basement lights flickered, then cut off completely. The generator had failed. The sound of boots echoed above, the unmistakable rhythm of men entering the house. Lila whispered, "They're inside." Everyone froze. The only sound was the faint drip of water and the pounding of Saylor's heartbeat in her ears. Then, the floorboards above them groaned. A voice floated down through the silence. Cold, amused, familiar. "Declan." "Creed," he called out, his tone almost playful. "You can run, but you can't hide her forever." Saylor's blood ran cold. Jaxon grabbed her hand, pulling her close. "Stay behind me," he whispered. Declan's boots creaked. Closer. He wasn't rushing. He was enjoying this. The hunt. Jaxon raised his gun, his finger steady on the trigger. He could feel Saylor's trembling behind him, could hear her shallow breaths in the dark. Every instinct in him screamed to end this, once and for all. But then, a faint beep. Lila's laptop screen flickered back to life. Her eyes widened. "Jax," she whispered urgently. "He planted explosives in the walls. This whole place is wired." Jackson's heart stopped. He turned toward the door, his voice a growl. "Everyone move! Now!" The sound of a single click echoed through the house. A deafening explosion tore through the night, the shock wave throwing Jaxon and Saylor to the ground. As smoke and fire swallowed the safe house, a single silhouette walked away through the flames. Declan Wolfe, holding a detonator and whispering, "One down." The explosion had left nothing but fire and silence. Smoke coiled up into the midnight sky like dark ribbons of revenge. The safe house, once a fortress, was now a smoldering graveyard of ash and shattered walls. The rain tried to smother the flames, but the earth hissed and steamed, as if even nature couldn't touch the violence that had just unfolded. Jackson's ears rang. The world moved in fragments, shards of light, muffled voices, the metallic taste of blood in his mouth. He forced himself up from the ground, coughing, his body aching, his knuckles split open. The blast had thrown him several feet away from where Saylor had been. His first thought wasn't survival, it was her. "Saylor!" he shouted hoarsely, stumbling through the smoke. His boots crushed glass, burnt paper, and pieces of the life they'd tried to protect. "Saylor, answer me!" A faint sound came from the debris, a cough, soft but real. His pulse surged. He ripped away a fallen beam, then another until he saw her, covered in dust and blood, trying to move. Relief and tear. Error hit him at once. He fell to his knees beside her, brushing the ash from her face. Hey, stay with me," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You're okay. I've got you." Her eyes fluttered open, weak but alive. "Jaxon." "Don't talk," he said, lifting her gently into his arms. "We're getting out of here." Ryder's voice echoed from a distance, rough and desperate. "Jax! Over here!" He turned to see Ryder limping, blood streaking down his temple, with Lila and Caden barely standing. They had made it, just barely. The fire roared behind them, painting their faces in shades of red and gold. "We've got to move," Lila said breathlessly. "The backup generators, there might be secondary charges." Jaxon didn't argue. He carried Saylor through the wreckage, his arms trembling but unwilling to let go. Every step he took, he could hear Declan's voice in his head, mocking him, reminding him that this wasn't over. They stumbled through the rain until they reached the tree line. The cool night air cut through the smoke, and the first light of dawn began to creep along the horizon. Saylor groaned softly, gripping Jackson's shirt. He knew where we were. "I know," he said quietly, his jaw tightening. "And he's going to regret that." They found an old barn nearby, half collapsed but still standing enough to shelter them. Jaxon laid Saylor down gently on a blanket Ryder scavenged from a corner. Her body trembled, her lips pale. Lila cleaned her wounds with shaking hands while Caden stood guard by the door, scanning the forest beyond. Jaxon crouched beside her, his eyes locked on her face. "You should have stayed behind when I told you to," he murmured, trying to mask the fear beneath his anger. Saylor's eyes opened, meeting his. "And let you die alone? Not a chance." That defiance, soft but fierce, broke something inside him. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling haste. "You're insane, you know that?" She smiled weakly. "Maybe I learned it from you." The moment lingered, raw, fragile, but alive. The chaos around them felt distant now, like the world had paused just for them. Jaxon brushed his thumb against her cheek, his expression torn between relief and guilt. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "People close to me, they don't last." "Then maybe it's time someone does," she whispered back. He looked away, his throat tight. The fire outside had dimmed, but the storm within him raged louder than ever. He wanted to protect her, to hold her, but he also knew that loving her meant painting a target on her back. Ryder's voice broke the moment. "We can't stay long. Wolf's men will sweep the area." Jaxon nodded, forcing himself to stand. "We move at first light." But as he turned back toward Saylor, something changed in her expression. She stared at him, not with fear, but with understanding. She saw the cracks beneath his armor. "Jaxon," she said softly, "he wants me, doesn't he? That's why he's doing all this." He hesitated. "He wants control. He wants to hurt me. And he knows taking you does both." Her breath trembled. "Then why save me?" He stepped closer, his voice low. "Because losing you isn't an option." The silence that followed was thick enough to drown in. Their eyes met, fire and water colliding, need tangled with fear. Slowly she reached for his hand, her fingers brushing his. He didn't pull away. Outside, the rain softened. Inside, the air between them grew heavy, charged. Jaxon knelt down, inches from her, his hand lingering near her jaw. His voice dropped, rough and unguarded. "Every time I try to keep you out of this, you pull me back in," he said. "And every time you do, I forget why I ever tried to stop you." Her heartbeat raced. "Then stop fighting it." His lips parted, But before he could speak, a noise outside froze everyone. The snap of a twig, too deliberate to be nature. Ride. Bar lifted his gun. We've got company. Jackson's expression hardened instantly. He motioned for Saylor to stay low and crept toward the entrance. Through the cracks in the old barn door, he saw the faint glow of headlights. A convoy, 3 SUVs, moving slowly down the dirt path. Lila hissed under her breath. That's Wolf's crew. Caden cursed softly. How the hell did they track us again? Jackson's stomach twisted. He turned to Lila. Grab your gear. We're leaving. But before they could move, a voice echoed from the darkness. Calm, chilling, too close. Leaving so soon? Saylor's heart stopped. That voice. Declan Wolf stepped into the faint light, a smirk cutting across his face. The storm behind him cast his figure in silhouette, like a phantom from a nightmare. His coat was soaked, his eyes glinting with amusement. He held up something small, shiny, and tossed it toward them. It landed near Jackson's feet. A tracker. You never learn, Declan said, tilting his head. You run, but I'm always one step ahead. Jackson raised his gun, his face a mask of fury. You shouldn't have come here. Declan smiled wider. Oh, but I should. You took something that belonged to me. His gaze shifted to Saylor, cold and deliberate. She flinched under the weight of it. Don't you dare, Jackson growled. Declan's eyes gleamed. Oh, I think I dare. Then, with a snap of his fingers, gunfire erupted from the tree line. Bullets tore through the barn walls, wood splintering in every direction. Everyone dove for cover as the air filled with screams and chaos. Saylor crawled across the floor, reaching for Jackson, but smoke and debris separated them. He shouted her name, his voice barely audible over the storm of gunfire. Outside, Declan watched with quiet satisfaction, lighting a cigarette as the barn burned behind him. He took one slow drag, his eyes fixed on the inferno. As the barn collapsed in flames, Saylor's scream echoed through the night. Jackson reached for her, but she was gone. When the smoke cleared, only her necklace remained in the ashes. The night was still, calm after months of chaos. The moon hung over the ocean like a silent witness, its reflection trembling on the waves that kissed the side of the sleek white yacht. Saylor stood at the railing, the wind brushing her hair against her face, her heart beating with an uneasy calm. Behind her, footsteps, measured, heavy, familiar, approached. Jaxon Creed, the Reaper, the man who had dragged her from a sinking ship into a life that had nearly destroyed them both, and somehow built something even more powerful in its ashes. He stopped behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth cutting through the ocean breeze. You're quiet tonight, he murmured, his deep voice softer than she'd ever heard it. Saylor didn't turn around. Quiet feels strange. After everything. Her voice carried both peace and the ghosts of what they had endured. Gunfire, betrayals, tears, and the way he'd looked at her like she was the only thing anchoring him to humanity. Jackson stepped beside her, his hand brushing hers on the railing. Strange isn't bad, he said. It's the first sign that we've survived. She smiled faintly, but her eyes stayed on the horizon. Survived. That's one word for it. He glanced at her profile, the way the moonlight painted her in silver and shadow. She had seen him at his worst, his rage, his bloodlust, his guilt, and she had stayed, not out of fear, not out of weakness, but out of something fierce and unshakable. Love. Do you ever think about the ship? She asked suddenly. About that night? He exhaled slowly. Every damn day. She turned toward him, her eyes meeting his. Do you regret it? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Not for a second. Her breath caught. Jackson. He opened it, revealing a ring unlike anything she'd ever seen. It wasn't dainty or overly glamorous. It was bold, a band of black gold wrapped around a diamond that shimmered like starlight caught in glass. I've faced death, betrayal, war, but nothing has terrified me more than this moment. He paused, a rare tremor in his voice. Saylor Quinn, you walked into my darkness without fear. You made me believe there's something worth protecting beyond power, Beyond control, you made me human again. Her lips parted, her eyes glistening. He stepped closer. Marry me, not because I can protect you, not because I owe you my life, but because I can't imagine one without you. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. Her world had been chaos since that night at sea, yet here, now, in the quiet rhythm of the ocean, everything finally made sense. Yes, she whispered. Jaxon Creed, I'll marry you. He exhaled sharply, relief mixing with disbelief, and then he pulled her into his arms. His kiss was rough and tender all at once, the kind that tasted like promises and redemption. When they broke apart, Lila's voice called from the deck above. About damn time. Ryder's laugh followed, gruff but genuine. For the first time, even his men seemed at peace. The Empire was steady again. Declan's loyalists had scattered, and Tessa had disappeared into the night. For now, the Reaper's reign was unchallenged. Saylor leaned against Jackson's chest, listening to his heartbeat. It feels normal, she said softly. Careful, he teased, kissing the top of her head. Normal's dangerous in our world. She smiled. Maybe danger's where we belong. He chuckled lowly. Then we'll face it together. The yacht drifted gently beneath the moonlight. The sea whispered against the hull, and for a rare moment, everything felt whole. Caden stood watch from the bow, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. Lila worked quietly inside, her screens showing every radar blip within 50 miles. The world had tried to destroy them, but somehow, they'd built something stronger from the wreckage. Saylor tilted her head to look at Jaxon. You really think we're free? He hesitated. Freedom's a myth, sweetheart. But peace is real. For tonight, we have that. She nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of his jacket over the faint scar that marked where he'd once been shot, protecting her. You scare me sometimes, she admitted softly. I scare myself sometimes, he replied, a rare smirk ghosting his lips. But you, he brushed her cheek, you make me want to be someone worth your fear. She pressed her forehead against his. Then don't stop trying. The hum of the yacht faded beneath the sound of their silence, a silence that wasn't empty but full. The sea stretched endlessly before them, glittering like liquid stars. Inside, a champagne bottle popped, followed by Lila's cheer. Saylor laughed for the first time in what felt like forever, a sound that made Jaxon close his eyes just to memorize it. He turned her toward the water again, wrapping his arms around her waist. You know, he murmured against her ear, I used to think love was weakness. And now? She asked, smiling. Now I think it's the only reason I'm still alive. The wind caught her hair again, tangling it between them. The world felt infinite and fleeting all at once. From somewhere behind them, Ryder's voice echoed faintly. To the Reaper and his queen! The crew cheered, laughter breaking the tension that had haunted their lives for too long. Saylor looked up at Jaxon, her eyes shining. Queen? He grinned. You earned it. They kissed again, slower this time, unhurried and deep. The ocean carried their reflection in ripples, a reminder of how far they'd come, from a wreckage of steel and fire to this moment of fragile eternity. As they pulled apart, she whispered, Promise me one thing, anything. No more secrets. He nodded, though something unreadable flickered behind his eyes. No more secrets. For the first time, Saylor believed him. They stood there in silence as the yacht cut through the dark water. Behind Tahtariche, the city lights shimmered faintly on the horizon, a reminder of the world waiting beyond this fragile peace. She rested her head on his chest and felt the steady rhythm beneath her palm. Life, love, survival. It felt like the end of a war. But the sea, vast and endless, never truly sleeps. As Jaxon and Saylor embraced, lost in the glow of their new beginning, the camera panned slowly toward the horizon. Beyond the silver line of waves, a shadow moved, a dark ship drifting silently, under no flag. In its hull, a single symbol painted in red, a wolf. Declan's legacy had not drowned with him. The storm was over, but somewhere out there, another was rising.